Hello, everyone. Welcome back to It's Called Football as we bring you a look ahead to the fixtures in Matchday 10 of the Premier League, about to kick off as of Friday. So, as we said, we are back to having a Friday fixture to kick off the weekend's matches. And this one is going to be, oh, surprise, surprise, a London derby as we see Crystal Palace host Tottenham Hotspur, the league leaders at the moment. Now, there's no doubt whatsoever that Tottenham deserve to be where they are uh, at the moment in the league. Their position doesn't lie, and after 9 games, it is no longer just a flash in the pan. They've kept their streak going. They will be hoping to continue it at Palace, who, although Palace is always a tough test as an away match for any team, they haven't quite been the usual formidable force they usually are at home. They've dropped points there. They haven't been scoring too many goals. And Crystal Palace only have one win in their last 5 league games. Tottenham Hotspur, on the other hand, have 4 wins out of their last 5 league games, and they have not yet lost in the league. One of only two teams to be in that situation at the moment. So big test for both Crystal Palace against a tough opponent and Tottenham Hotspur at a tough away ground, but should be a cracking game. Saturday then sees us begin with another London matchup as Chelsea play host once again. After they managed to get a draw against Arsenal last week, they now welcomed Brentford to their stadium. Brentford, who picked up a convincing win in their own game last week, will be hoping to continue that form against a Chelsea side that looks rejuvenated at the moment. Arsenal, on the other hand, after managing to salvage a draw last week, are back at home and they will be hoping to pick up all 3 points against bottom of the table Sheffield United. Now, as we know, Sheffield are a tricky test, and it would be unwise for anyone to underestimate any team in this league. Uh, but probably could be forgiven for thinking that Arsenal have an edge in this game. We then have a matchup that's actually very interesting and probably worth tuning in for in Bournemouth against Burnley, despite the fact that none of the traditional top sides are playing in this match. Uh, we'll explain a little bit later as to why this one might be worth your time. And then Saturday's matches conclude with Wolves hosting Newcastle United. Wolves have been on a decent run of form at the moment, and Newcastle have been dominating a lot of their games recently. So this one should also be a very fun match to watch between two teams that are on the up and looking to stay on the up. Sunday sees the remainder of the 5 matches from Matchday 10. We see West Ham host Everton in the first game, which should, on paper, be a very good match. Uh, West Ham have played a European match in midweek and came away defeated, unfortunately for them, and they will be looking to set things right because they are still in a healthy position in the league. Everton had a little bit of a stumble last week when they lost to Liverpool, but aside from that, they have also been picking up some points in recent weeks and will be hoping to get back into that swing of things starting Sunday. Aston Villa, who came off of destroying West Ham last weekend, then welcome Luton Town. Luton, who are just outside of those bottom three places at the moment, but you wonder how long they will stay there uh, given the fact that they are struggling to pick up points at the moment. Now, last week they did quite well, picking up a draw at Nottingham Forest despite being 2 goals down, but I think Aston Villa are going to be a sterner test for Luton. Sunday also sees Brighton host Fulham in a match that you would think favors Brighton heavily. Fulham have just not looked good this season so far for the most part. Um, they've looked toothless in front of goal for the most part again. And Brighton, on the other hand, have been flying, and they are coming off the back of a victory in their European match in midweek over Dutch powerhouses Ajax. So you would think Brighton are probably heavily the favorites in this game. Sunday sees Liverpool also then play host to Nottingham Forest in a match that, although Forest have some decent talent in their ranks, Liverpool should have too much for them. And then the cracker, the big match of the weekend, sees the Manchester Derby, the battle between the red and the blue halves of Manchester as United and City go head to head at Old Trafford, the stadium of Manchester United. Just a reminder as to how the table looks right now in the Premier League. We see Tottenham Hotspur leading the way on points now, with Man City and Arsenal tied on points, with City ahead on goal difference, just behind Spurs. Liverpool right behind them, and Aston Villa right behind Liverpool. And then there's a little bit of a gap in points there as Newcastle and Brighton chase the top five, with Manchester United, West Ham, and then Chelsea making up the rest of the top 10. The bottom half sees Crystal Palace, who are tied with points on Chelsea, but below them on goal difference right now. Wolves, who have been quietly, as we said in our last video, Wolves have been quietly doing the business and just working their way up the table. Their match this weekend against Newcastle will be a tougher test than what they've had so far, but there's no reason why they shouldn't have some faith in themselves to keep their results going. After all, Wolves were the first team to defeat Manchester City, the current champions and three-time back-to-back league winners, the treble winners, whatever title you want to put it. Wolves achieved what it looked like no team would be able to do this season, and there's no reason they shouldn't try to do so again as they welcome Newcastle. Fulham sit in a reasonably healthy position, but their performances leave a lot to be desired at the moment, and the same could probably be said of Brentford. Nottingham Forest have made hard work of some of their games, but are sitting in a decent position, while the bottom five did not move from their spots right now. The one benefit for Everton, Luton Town, and possibly Sheffield United is that Burnley and Bournemouth are facing off against each other, which means it is unlikely that both of them will move up the table. That means that there is a strong chance for Everton, Luton, and Sheffield United to move up the table a little bit, at least, if they, or at least distance themselves from danger a little bit, should they pick up results this weekend. So, our featured matches, there are two that we recommend that you definitely try to tune in for if you can. Ideally, obviously, if you have time, tune in for even more. But these are the two that we think will probably be uh, most entertaining, either because of the status of the teams playing or because of what's on the line for one or both teams. Uh, Manchester United and Manchester City is a rivalry that has grown a lot more in recent years. For decades and decades, Manchester United was the dominant half of Manchester. In fact, a lot of people did not know that Manchester City existed. But United, since 2013, have fallen away a little bit in the league. They've been surpassed a bit by Manchester City, who have really risen and become the dominant club in English football. Much is said about how they made their way up to the top of the game in England, but there's no doubt that they are one of the best teams in the world, and right now their current team is probably one of the best in club football history. It should be a great match on Sunday. And again, just like with the North London derby between Arsenal and Tottenham and other such local city rivalries, how you've been playing in your recent games has almost no impact on what happens when you face off against your local rival. So this one should be a match full of fireworks, full of energy, and full of emotion. We highly recommend you tune into this one if you can. Our second match doesn't actually feature any of the top teams, but as we mentioned, Bournemouth and Burnley are both sitting in the bottom three. In case you missed some of our videos from earlier on in the season, or you're new to following English football and how it's structured, just a reminder that the bottom three places in the Premier League at the end of the season get relegated or demoted in a way down to the next division. And so, obviously, for teams that are struggling and are sitting in those bottom three places right now, it's very, very crucial that they try to get their way out so that they're not desperately trying to get out of those bottom three spots at the tail end of the season when other teams can then pick them apart and these teams are desperate. So these two facing off against each other at this stage is actually good for both of them because whoever wins gives themselves a very, very solid chance of getting out of those bottom three places even at this early stage, which can only be a good thing. Yeah, you could argue that it's more important for Bournemouth because they are without a win this season. Them and Sheffield United, these are the two clubs that are still looking to get a win in this year's edition of the Premier League, and they are at home, so the pressure is on Bournemouth to try and get a result here. So, what are the big stories leading into this match day? Well, one of them actually is a bit of sad news and tinged with a bit of controversy because Everton have been hit by a double blow this week. First of all, there's the very sad news that the chairman of Everton Football Club has passed away at the age of 78. Anyone who follows Everton, massive condolences to them. And I think if you ask any supporter, any long-term supporter of Everton, they will tell you just how much their chairman cared for their club and tried to make sure that they were always run well. The second blow that has been hit to Everton off the field is that an investigation that started several months ago by an independent entity, not the Premier League itself, has has finished its kind of investigation at the moment, and the Premier League is potentially going to punish Everton with a points deduction of 12 points. Given that Everton are currently only sitting on 7 points, if this points deduction were to happen, it would mean that Everton fall immediately to -5 or -5 points and at the very bottom of the Premier League, which would put them almost immediately and almost certainly into a third battle out of those relegation places in 3 consecutive years. It would be a real shame for the club because they did put enough results together that they're safe at the moment. Obviously, there's still a lot to do, but this would make their job just a whole lot harder. Uh, the controversy around this one, it's more because there's a lot of talk about how Manchester City have risen to the top of the game at the moment, and a lot of it seems to be implied that Man City have abused the money that their sponsors provide them. Essentially, that Manchester City have just bought their way to the top of the game. It's there are pending charges against Manchester City that are apparently due to be heard in a judicial atmosphere in January, but it does seem it's rankling amongst the fans of different clubs in the league that Manchester City's sentence, if there is to be one, has been continuously delayed, whereas Everton, who have only had this one charge financially against them, have been hit already. Man City, for to put this into perspective, Manchester City have had 115 charges leveled at them, and yet somehow it's these sorts of things to clubs that have less ability to defend themselves. They are somehow getting hit by these sanctions earlier and harder than City are, which is it's obviously unfair, and we really hope that Everton makes it through this situation if they do get the points deducted. Onto a more cheerful aspect of the league, Aston Villa are currently in red hot form, and they have just come off the back of a dominant success in Europe as well. They are one of one of seven Premier League sides who are playing in European competition, and they have not let the league down in representation here. Very, very good performance from them today, which is Thursday in Europe, and obviously having beaten West Ham last weekend and made it 11 home wins in a row. They will be looking to make it 12 as they welcome Luton to town. Um, yeah, there's not really a lot. I think Villa just in general said this in our Matchday 9 recap that I think Villa have gone a little under the radar and not really getting the appreciation that they should be getting. Crystal Palace is a side that's unfortunately facing uh, kind of the opposite circumstance to Aston Villa. They have not been in good form. Their only win in their last five games, although a notable one, was against Manchester United. But given that United are out of form and not exactly the world beaters they once used to be, not sure that it says a lot about Crystal Palace that they were able to win that game, but none of the others who have been against arguably easier opponents. Palace have work to do, and they don't have an easy game this weekend to try and fix up in, but they kind of have to. They don't really have a choice. They have to start getting results and picking up points now. As we said, Manchester United and Manchester City is a rivalry that for a long time no one really took notice of in terms of a local derby because Manchester United were so far and away the dominant team whenever these two met. However, City have blown away records that United and other powerhouses of England and European football have set over the years. And there's no doubt that at the moment, City has the best manager in the world, some of the best players in the world, even if they're unavailable with injury at the moment. Uh, and you just know Manchester City are always going to be fighting for all the top honors in the game. So, but like we said, form goes out the window when you're playing your local rivals. And United have actually had a decent set of results whenever they play host to Man City, and they will be desperately hoping they can do that again this weekend. As we said as well, Bournemouth is a side that really, really needs to start fixing up their form. Um, they're they need to start winning. They don't really have an option. Every week that goes by without a win is just going to put more pressure on the players, on the manager, and is going to increase dissatisfaction amongst the fans. Uh, they can't really ask for a better opportunity to try and get that first win than when they're facing Burnley, another team who is facing a similar situation. Although they have got at least a win, Burnley have struggled for form and they have been losing the vast majority of their games so far. Bournemouth can play well. We have seen during the season so far that they can play well and they can, at least to an extent, hold their own against some of the top teams. They held Chelsea to a draw. Um, Although they lost badly to Arsenal, there was a spell of the game initially where they were taking the game to Arsenal. They can hold their own against the big sides, and technically, and I guess based on that, if there's any correlation, they should be able to more than hold their own against a team that is languishing in the same part of the table that they are. So, what do we think are going to be the results from this weekend? A lot of interesting matches, and my instinct is kind of telling me that there's going to be a repeated score line we're going to see. It doesn't usually happen in the Premier League, so I may be wrong on some of them, but here goes anyway. I think Spurs ultimately have too much for Palace. They're playing good football, they're confident, and they have a style of play that is sustainable at the moment as long as they have their top players. And I think as long as they still do have those top players and they keep on going from strength to strength, they will keep on winning games. I think that's not changing this weekend, and I think Spurs are going to win 2-0 away to Palace. Chelsea and Brentford is a difficult one to predict because Brentford, when they're on form, will give any team in this league a tough match. Last season, Brentford were the only team to actually beat eventual champions Manchester City, both home and away. Yeah, however, I think Chelsea are starting to click. They're starting to get into form, and they have a lot of positives they can take from last weekend when they hosted Arsenal. As a result, I think Chelsea are going to simply build off of that, and they will eventually be a bit too much, I think, for Brentford, and they'll win this one 3-1. I also think that Arsenal are going to win 3-1 in their match. I think Sheffield United will end up scoring. I think they do have some talent, and Arsenal have a tendency to give up soft goals at home. Weirdly, the one game where they haven't done that so far in the league is against Manchester City. I can't explain why that's the case, but it happened. But against weaker sides and against sides that have not actually threatened as much, Arsenal have somehow gifted goals away. And I worry that that could happen again. However, Arsenal should, keyword should, have enough firepower to come out victorious in this game. Bournemouth and Burnley. Like I said, pressure is on Bournemouth in this game. Burnley can go there knowing that they're facing a team below them in the table, which is rare at the moment given where Burnley are. And Bournemouth have to start delivering on results. And I think they gave a decent account of themselves initially against Wolves last week, even though they ended up losing the game. But I think Bournemouth may finally get their first victory of the season this weekend, and I'm going for 2-1, 2-1 to Bournemouth. Wolves at Newcastle. I think although Wolves have done well, Newcastle have been very strong, and they've dismantled teams that are below them in the table. I think at the end of the day, they've just got a little bit too much strength. While Wolves might get a goal, I think Newcastle just have too much firepower, really, and I'm predicting them to win this one 3-1. Like I said, I'm kind of thinking there's going to be a common score line here in a lot of games, but obviously, I could be wrong. I'm not notorious for getting my predictions spot on in terms of scoreline. West Ham and Everton. West Ham, I think, are just simply a stronger side at the moment, and Everton, with all of their off-field issues, there's a chance that they're affected a little bit by this. Um, and I think West Ham will run out fairly comfortable victors in this one 2-0. But I do sincerely hope for Everton that they fix up and they get their form together again as soon as they can, really. Maybe it will happen this weekend, we don't know. Villa are quietly going from strength to strength. They're beating some of the other sides that are around them in the table, and they're giving a tough match to teams that might be above them and a little bit, on paper at least, better than them. Um, I expect that they'll make quite light work of Luton, if I'm honest. Given that Villa are at home, it's a slim chance that they somehow drop this winning streak that they're on at home. And Luton aren't a formidable force, I think, for the players that Villa have. Meanwhile, Villa have players who are dangerous all over the pitch. And I think eventually they will, once they get that first goal, it's going to be a little bit of a cakewalk. Brighton and Fulham, I think also is going to be a fairly comfortable game in Brighton's favour. Fulham against Tottenham last week were woeful, to put it nicely. And Brighton, despite losing to Manchester City, they do offer a lot, and they've picked up decent results in other games against good sides in the league. They've beaten Newcastle already. They've drawn with Liverpool. There's results here for them if if they can keep their form together. Brighton will still continue to be a threat, and I think this weekend they will pick up a win with minimal problem. Liverpool and Forest. I think Liverpool still have this little bit of an ability to leak goals, similar to how Arsenal are doing at the moment. And yet Liverpool's firepower is so good that it's hard to look past anything other than Liverpool win. I think it's going to be 3-1 in this case. And I'm also going to predict 3-1 in the final match, but I think Man City, despite the injury to De Bruyne, they have their midfield controller back in Rodri. And although one of their defenders is suspended for this game, I think City just have too much, and their attacking forces are starting to gel, starting to become their usual dangerous selves. And I think United are still struggling to effectively be clinical in their attacks. And ultimately, I think that's what will cost them in this game. I think that's where we're going to leave you for today. Apologies if this video is a little long. If you enjoyed it though, please drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate the support from anyone who continues to watch. And we will be back soon after the weekend to bring you all the highlights from the games and recap all the big moments that occur in Matchday 10. But for now, we'll leave you here. And remember, it's called football.